Hello everyone, this is Gary. We're going to pick up where we left off in the last video. This one is about Photoshop. So basically, I'm going to take the 4 images that I shot using the technique that the last video went over, and we're going to put them into Photoshop. So the first thing, I shot in Camera Raw. So here are the 4 images. I'm going to open them all up in Camera Raw, and here they are. I'm going to click on Select All. Now, I'm going to hold down the Shift key. If I can draw your attention to this button over here, it says Open Images. If I hold down the Shift key, it changes to Open Objects. So I'm going to click that button with the Shift key held down, and it's going to open all of these images into Photoshop. So here are the 4 images. 1, 2, 3, 4. So basically, I'm going to take all 4 images and combine them all on their own layer. So basically, these came in as smart objects, and I'll deal with that in a second. But right now, I'm going to take my Move tool, I'm going to drag it up onto the first image, hold down my Shift key to pin register it, and then I'm going to do the same with the next image, drag it up into the first image, hold down the Shift key, drag down and let go. And the last image, drag it up into the first image, hold down the Shift key and let go. Now, if I pull up my layers palette, you can see I've got these 4 images all on separate layers. Now they're smart objects. So let me explain what that means a little bit. So here's the bottom image. If I double click this, it'll open it back up in a RAW. This gives me the flexibility of having access to the Camera Raw plugin, as well as all of the cool features of Photoshop. So now we have 4 layers, each with their own smart object, each allowing me access to the Camera Raw plugin should I need it. Now, I'm going to turn off all of the images except the bottom layer. And I'm going to make a copy of this bottom layer, but I'm going to do it in a very special way. I'm going to right-click on the layer and go New Smart Object via Copy. That gives me an entirely new independent smart object from the one below it. If I just made a regular copy, both of those layers would be accessing the same smart object, and whatever change I made in one layer would be reflected in both. And that's not what I want. I'm going to call this this layer Luminance, which will be clear in a second. All right, now I'm going to turn this layer off. Now we're basically back to the base layer, and I want to make a few adjustments to it. So I'm going to double click its icon, open it up in Camera Raw, and I'm going to increase the exposure by about 1.5 stops, like that. That's good. And I'll increase the clarity a little bit. Clarity increases mid-tone contrast. All right, that's all I'm going to do to this layer. I'm going to hit OK, and that's going to basically commit those modifications to the layer. Here we go. Great. So now I'm going to turn on the second layer I made that's called Luminance. I'm going to double click on its icon to open it up in the Camera Raw, and we're going to make some radical changes. I'm going to take my fill light and go all the way up, and that kind of makes it look like a HDR image. And I'm going to take my blacks slider and pull it all the way up. I'm going to increase my exposure, and I'm going to hit OK. All right, so now we have this hideous layer, but if I change its blending mode from normal to luminosity, watch what happens. See, now I've got all this hyper detail. Look at all this detail. That's before, that's after. Look at the difference. See all that detail that came in? The reason that happened is because when you change the blending mode to luminosity, takes the luminance information from the layer that you're blending and combines it with the hue and saturation information on the layer below it. So the luminance data is what we want. That's what gives us all this extra detail and contrast. So that's how you get that look. It's actually pretty simple. So now I've got this hyper detailed image, but there's a couple of things I want to do. So basically I'm going to create a layer mask on this layer, and I'm going to fill it with black, canceling out the entire layer. So now I'm going to take a brush Let me make this a little bigger. I'm going to take a brush, and with my foreground color white, I'm going to increase the size of the brush, and I'm just going to paint back in all of that detail on my face, but nowhere else. All right, cool. So everything else is looking pretty good. We're done with that. So now I'm going to turn on the splash layer. Now, I'm going to double click on its icon to open it up in the Camera Raw, and I'm going to increase its exposure. I'm going to increase the fill light. I really want to exaggerate those glass slivers and the water droplets. And I'll increase the contrast, and I'll pull up the black slider to separate the glass from the background even more. So now I've got this super exaggerated version where the glass is really bright. And that's pretty good. So I'm going to hit OK. And now check this out. All I really need to do is simply change the blending mode to screen. And look at that. What screen does is allow everything that's neutral gray or lower to get canceled out. So obviously the broken wine glass is not in the same place as the wine glass that was taken with my image. So I'm going to basically take my move tool by hitting the V key and holding down the shift key and moving my left arrow key. I can move that entire layer to the left and then up just a touch. Yeah, that's pretty good. So now they're basically registered. That's good. So I'm going to turn off all the layers except the bottom layer, and I'm going to create a layer mask for it, and I'm going to make sure the foreground color is black. I'm going to grab a brush, and I'm going to basically just paint out the wine glass. Now, the great thing about understanding how blending modes work, and I don't have time to go over blending modes with you. I only showed you one, luminosity. But the great thing about understanding blending modes is you'll know when it's time to create a really detailed and intricate mask and when you don't have to. And this is one of the times when you don't have to. So check it out. Right? Look at that. So now we're actually almost done. It's time to add the lemon. There's the lemon. I'm going to double click on its icon, open it up into Camera Raw. I'm going to increase this exposure. I'll give it a little fill light too. Brighten it up like that. Okay, I like that. I'm going to hit OK. All right, so now with this, I can try changing its blending mode to lighten. Okay, not bad. Not bad at all. So now, on top of this lemon layer, I'm going to create a blank layer. I'm going to call it Clone. And I'm going to take the clone stamp tool, and I'm going to make sure that all layers is checked, and I'm going to turn off align sample. Every time I do a stroke and start another one, it'll always go back to the original spot. It takes a lot of practice. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm just trying to cover up that original glass ball, so which is what I used to break the wine glass to begin with. All right, that's not bad. Okay, let's check our work. Let's move back. Yeah, I can live with that. I can definitely live with that. All right, except because I moved this layer, I've got this big border over here, so I'm going to make my brush, my clone stamp brush, big. Now I'm going to sample material from over here and copy it over. Still on the clone layer. Okay, great. Almost done, actually. Wow. So the last thing, let's add that sliver of glass. But I'm out of time, so we'll pick this up next time in part 3, which is where we'll add the final piece to this image.